Welcome to critical discourse analysis of articles with opposing beliefs on COVID-19 mandates. My name is Isaiah Hamilton, and joined with me is
Brianna Cellini.
So when first looking at the representation of events and issues and their relations to the audience, we can see a stark difference between the two articles. In Article 1, the author uses the discourse of religion or the discourse of church to address a more religious audience and uses that to his advantage. And through the verb-adverb usage, we see that he discredits the opposing belief that the police was in the right mind. So there's no support of the police choice in this example. In the bottom left, we see that there's a direct address towards the audience, which is a different approach to that of Article 2. And he suggests that changes need to be made and makes more clear the ambiguity of the government's power by saying such things as the federal officials are limited in their power to impose orders. In Article 2, we see a different approach in such that he's much more aggressive towards the audience, and he uses this diction intentionally. So we see the pronoun usage of you, and he says the mask does not keep you from expressing yourself. It limits where and how you can speak, and this was very intentional. And we see that the use of people of power, such as scholars and judges, to help leverage his claim even more so. And in the bottom right, we also see that the author is taking the direct approach again with directly opposing his the anti-maskers, and he uses polarizing language to attract the similarly opinionated audience. So the audience is either going to greatly agree or greatly disagree with what he is saying.
It's also important to look at implicit and explicit evaluations conveyed by the text. So starting with Article 1 in our example on the left, using the noun outbreak has less urgent of a connotation than pandemic, which backs the author's evaluation of personal liberties holding greater importance than public health. The adjective core describes that these freedoms exist in every individual, and the pronoun we almost acts as a call to action to combat COVID-19 policies. The adjective long-term to describe the noun damage evokes an emotional response in the reader, as one might fear that these freedoms will forever be stripped away. So this example addresses the discourse of autonomy. And then transitioning to our Article 2, the author sarcastically begins the sentence with the adverb unfortunately, and here we see COVID-19 described as a pandemic rather than an outbreak. The author uses more adjectives with negative connotations to describe the disease before stating that these reasons justify the government's acts, making it more believable to the reader. The adjective noun pattern, wide range of reasonable restrictions, legitimizes the government's policies as well. And so then in the author's final sentence, linked to an M dash, which draws significance, it indexically points to the deadliness of the virus when he states, and not just metaphorically. So in the two articles, we see key differences in adjective usage and the signals of blame. So it's interesting to look at the way social actors are represented. So first, we see in Article 1 that they are presented as First Amendment watchdogs. And I feel like this can be interpreted in two ways. So when we think of a watchdog, they can sometimes be perceived as threatening, reckless, and unknowledgeable. And it's never really flattering to be compared to a dog. However, the alternative would be that watchdogs always have their owner's best interest in mind and will do whatever is necessary to protect the owner from danger. And then looking at Article 2 and the representation of social actors as anti-maskers, I feel like this phrase indexes to the term anti-vaxxers, and using anti has a negative stigma attached as well because of this, and it will cue a negative emotional response in the reader going forth.
So now when we're looking at the linguistic and semiotic codes that are represented throughout the text, we can see again a stark difference between the two articles. When we look at Article 1, there's a much more aggressive undertone with the author's personal beliefs. We see the usage of our and we that applies assembly that's referenced through the First Amendment rights in which the author is trying to protect. We see it referenced throughout the religion, speech, press, assembly, or petition again in the last sentence, and the verb usage of infringe and demand or strong verbs. And then again, in the bottom left-hand corner, we see the usage of quotations to help validate the author's claim by referencing other like-minded individuals to help support his claim and validate it more so. And then we also see repetition of the word protect, which inserts the author's bias in a way that most people cannot counteract. So since the word protect has such a positive connotation, it's very hard to disprove that word in a positive setting or in a sentence at all. And author 2 takes a much different approach, more satirical, and using the nickname Costco Karen. And this nickname is also the signifier, and the contemporary the negative connotation to Karen is the signified. So her polarizing portrayal that the author uses is key to this code, is such that if you are not aware of her namesake or the discourse surrounded around the nickname of Karen and the current political climate, you're not going to understand what the author is trying to do with this language. And then in the bottom right, we see something very interesting as well. The governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, the author does not agree with his March 19th order banning. However, he addresses him formally with a pronoun. However, who he does agree with is referenced as a congressional candidate. So the verbs connotations that are also used in this example are very starkly and polarizing. So we see again that enforcement of polarizing speech throughout the text to help divide the audience into either supporters or somebody who's going to be opposing the author's beliefs.
Yeah, so just taking a step back, the verbs and nouns in each example demonstrate the core values highlighted throughout their respective articles, while both addressing health concerns. So Article 1 places a greater emphasis on human liberties, while Article 2 supports the assurance of health and safety. So overall, there are many discourses worth reiterating throughout the text. Article 1 highlighted autonomy, nationalism, democracy, emphasizing that a disease should not prevent citizens from practicing their constitutional rights. And in Article 2, the author demonstrated a great amount of trust and respect for the government's response to COVID-19, also noting that public health is of the utmost importance to society. So through linguistic practices and pronoun usages, the us and them, or scholars and anti-maskers dichotomy in this example specifically shines through. And discourses are woven through each article, and it requires analysis through a linguistic lens to understand the effect that language and discursive practices have on the reader.